Joining me now is an economist and public affairs analyst, Mayokun Ilo. Good morning and thanks for joining us on TVC Breakfast.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Let's take a look at the projections of the 2020-2022 budget after the medium-term expenditure framework was brought forth before the lawmakers. What do you make of all of these projections, basically?
Well, it is not very different from 2019 budget. It's based on what you call incremental budgeting, maybe 5–10% year on year. But that said, we are going to have to look at the foundations on which those budgets were made. One is an oil price projection of $55 per barrel, which means we have to be very careful. It was initially built to be $60 based on our estimate. We look at, okay, the world we are living in now, there is the possibility that the price might go down further. So that is why we bring ourselves down to $55. If I were to be in the shoes of Mr. President, I would rather do it more in the region of $50 because anything can happen. Shale oil has disrupted the market. You know, they have found it is cheaper and it's in the US. People we are looking at to buy our products are having their own oil now. So those are the things that will impact on the prices of crude oil and ultimately on the performance of the budget. We don't have a lot of wiggle room when we are doing budgeting in Nigeria. Another thing is the dollar price. You know, everybody is buying dollar at 360 naira for $1. We are using our budget to be based on 300, 305. If we are not careful, there will be a lot of round tripping. Some people will take advantage of that price differential and make the economy of these hard-earned resources. So there are other things we still have to look at. There's this African continental free trade agreement. It's coming into effect next year. If we don't tidy up our homes and the currency issues too, if we don't tidy our home and make sure that we fix the power issues and we fix infrastructure to a lot of degree, we are going to be finding out that jobs will be living here because things will be produced in other countries in Africa and shipped to Nigeria because the market is here, and we are not benefiting from it.
Another aspect is the fact that the government is looking at, projections of making income, generating income from value-added tax of about 170 trillion naira. And you know how it is when it comes to tax collection in Nigeria. Some have said perhaps we should start looking at taxing luxury goods.
Well, taxing luxury goods will help. But the issue is government is looking at, because everybody has said, okay, the issue with Nigeria is there's no revenue, you know, but you don't kill the goose that lays the golden egg. Lagos, Port Harcourt, Kano, Ibadan, those are the target points, you know, where those who are educated are living. The remaining areas are usually left off the hook. The problem in Nigeria is that you are obedient to the law, there is more pressure and load put on you. They should look for a way of expanding the tax net without burdening those who are currently paying tax. The issue of VAT, we have one of the lowest VAT in the country. But at the same time, what about the other issues that people have to contend with? If I'm going to Ibadan, for instance, there's every likelihood that if I travel with my car and come back, I will end up, if I'm not doing the shock, I will do the tire. If I'm not doing the tire, one or two other things we have issues with my car. I don't know, it pays more to maybe take transport than to even have to drive. You know, we are not paying the money to government, but we are losing resources.
All right, Mayokun Ilo, thank you for your time on TVC Breakfast.
You're welcome.
Joining me now is an economist and public affairs analyst, Mayokun Ilo. Mayokun, good morning. It's nice to have you join me this morning.
Good morning to you.
We have been running a deficit budget for a long period of time now. I can't remember when we ran a surplus or balanced budget. Now, what are the implications of running this deficit budget over this long period of time?
Well, at the basic level, it's like you want to consume, but you don't have money. Then you want somebody to lend you some money pending when you have your own. I can do it for a year or two, but when in the last 10 years you are still borrowing and you are telling me my own money is coming, or wait for it to, you know, people begin to lose trust. fine, the international institutions, they will always lend, especially when against the backdrop of oil. But there are some red flags, coming up. The people we are getting this money from, you have to look at what are their own interests. I'll give you an example. China has been taking over some facilities across Africa because they collected money and they have not been paying back. They factor it into the contract.
Like the one we had in Zambia.
They factor into the contract that if you can't pay, we can take over this your port and use for 10, 50 years without recourse to you. It's like giving away your sovereignty bit by bit. Nigeria may not be in immediate danger of such, but if we really want to achieve those things we projected, that maybe take 100 million people out of poverty, it has to start from savings. You cannot borrow your way out of poverty, but you can save your way out of poverty. There's something they do in Norway. They have this oil fund. It's worth about $1 trillion now. It's the biggest sovereign wealth fund. That's where we got the idea of sovereign wealth. But Nigeria has jettisoned the idea of sovereign wealth fund altogether.
When all leaders, governors say
because
they want
to consume the money now, you understand? So if we are really serious, we need everybody to come to the table. The much we talk about federal government budgets, for me, it's good. But if we really want to lift people out of poverty, the federal government has to sit down with the states and with the local governments and even with civil societies that this is the future we have in mind. How do we get there? I don't mind having my own income, like cutting it into 50%, if I know that, okay, in the next 20 years, all the savings I get can be used to purchase maybe a house or something for my family.
There's still very much concern about the performance of the 2019 budget. There were a statement or report credited to the Minister of Labour, Chris Ngige, who said that about 60% of the 2019 budget will be rolled over into 2020 budget. What concerns do you have from that window, if it is anything to go by?
The window for that came from this June to June budget cycle. Now we want to try January to December. The budget for 2019 was passed, I think, around June of this year or ending of May. At the end of the day, it's going to create inflation. It's going to create some room for corruption if we are not careful in monitoring them. Because if the things you want to do in 2019, you haven't done them, and you said, okay, we are going to add more money in 2020, some things cannot be done overnight. If it will take you 3 years, for instance, to build a particular infrastructure, and you are supposed to be releasing money in tranches, and somewhere along maybe 40%, you are supposed to pay for 10%, you now say, okay, the one of last year plus the one of this year, could take 40% and go home, you understand, or continue to do it. Somebody will feel, okay, I can make a shortfall, in terms of, okay, maybe they won't notice if I reduce the quality of whatever, I make do with the rest of the money. So by and large, maybe this is a transition period, but I'm not very comfortable with it.
Considering that transition period, if we have to look at the figures and look at it practically, if you're rolling over 60% of the 2019 budget into 2020, shouldn't it reflect in the budget estimate for 2020, for instance, because you're taking over, you're taking 2019 chunk of 2019 budget into 2020 budget?
Well, that's where what you call budgeting control, budgetary control comes in. We are not doing much of that. Everybody talks about the budget, but nobody talks about control. If we take seriously the idea of budgetary control, the same way we talk about budget, I think we can manage that. Right. But if the presidency and all those people who are affiliated with them don't take the issue of control seriously, then they can be, at the end of the day, they'll be losing some of the resources they are talking about.
All right. They also talked about the issue of the National Assembly tampering with figures. The use of the word tamper, people can see from different perspectives depending on how. But when the National Assembly tinker or jiggle with the figures to say, okay, there was still the issue of whether the National Assembly had the right to, change the figures here and there, amend figures here and there. The executive has continually said that it makes it difficult for them to implement when the National Assembly tampers or amends the figures.
Well, it makes it difficult, but all of them, the last time I checked, they live in Abuja. There's supposed to be this camaraderie between them, especially when you have the same ruling party that owns the legislature. They are the ones there with the majority. So everything should not happen within the chambers of the National Assembly. You can see yourselves in the evening go over the figures together so that if you have issues, come and defend this. If you can't defend it, I'm going to take this particular line item out until you are able to defend it. You know, National Assembly doesn't have the power to actually increase budget, but they can reduce it, or they can take particular items out of it and say, okay, go and amend this and bring it back to me. You know, before they pass it, they should actually revert back to the executive and ask them, these are the things we have issues about. Look at it and get back to us.
All right. We wait for that aspect of things to be challenged in court so they can put pay to it, whether the National Assembly has the right to tinker with the figures. Michael Ilo, thank you so much for coming on the program.
You're welcome.
Joining me now is an economist and public affairs analyst, Mayokun Ilu. Good morning. Thanks for joining us on TVC Breakfast.
Yeah, good morning.
Now, there's no doubt that the talks about returning to the January-December schedule has been on, and there was some concerns raised when the MTEF, that's the medium-term expenditure framework, wasn't laid before the National Assembly, and there were concerns raised that perhaps there was going to be a delay in a budget, budget proposal and having the budget approved and all of that. But now that we have this, are you still confident that with that happening, we wouldn't be having issues of perhaps rolling over certain things like the Minister of Labour said 60% of the 2019 budget will be rolled over to 2020? Are you confident that we wouldn't be having such things happening again?
Well, with the current people, the current leadership of the National Assembly, I think if there's some stability there, we'll be sure that there's this sync with the executive. They wouldn't have that problem. So, but you know, the first time is always tricky.
Really?
You know, last year we had issues of June to June. So, with the rollover this time, I don't expect to see it. I shouldn't be talking about this next year, having issues with rolling over. But you know, government sometimes they create these things on purpose.
Really?
You know, because if you have 1 year to spend an amount and 6 months into the time you have not even touched it, even when there's a delay in budget approval, there is some allocation, appropriation that is possible for the executive to actually put their hand into and be spending. You know, you can't delay salaries, for instance, because the budget has not been passed. You can delay some other entitlements, but not the basic incomes. You know, so I believe that after this year, maybe if you can merge the rollover with the 2020 budget and execute perfectly, then upper year we shouldn't have this problem.
But then another issue being raised is, does the timing really translate to budget performance?
You know, there's an issue we have in this part of the world. Budget, even if you say budget cycle is January to December or June to June, that doesn't mean that you wake up 2 months to that time. Budgeting and the whole idea of budget cycle is a year-long activity. You start from this year. If I spend, for instance, if I spend 20 naira on doing something this year, I should be thinking, okay, now that I'm spending 20 naira, what is the projection for next year? You have experts of all cadres in every ministry in this country, every department, every agency. Use them. If I'm spending 1 million on a particular item of expenditure this year, what are the projections for next year? If it's for training, okay, now that we have 20,000 staff here, are we looking at employing some more people? If that is the projection, then we should make allocation for their training and put it ahead. Government needs a central database, you know, for all their economic activities, so that each of those MDAs, when they have something that has to be factored into the next budget, they put it so that when they need to call for that information, it doesn't take long.
But that has always been a challenge when it comes to data.
Then if we cannot be doing the same thing over and over again and expect different results. This government came into power on the basis of change. They should deliver that change.
All right, another issue that some have raised is, why don't we look at perhaps a 3-year budget proposal instead of sticking to this yearly proposal? Other countries are
well,
embracing
3 years
this.
is actually what you have on this
The
medium-term expenditure framework. But, you know, everybody is talking of a framework. What we need is a roadmap that will take us into the next 50 years. This 3 years stuff doesn't take us anywhere. It's more like just trying to survive or gasping for water, you know, gasping for air, as it were, you know. But what happens to 30-year plan, 50-year plan, so that we now go back and say, okay, if you want to be in this place in the next 30 years, what do we need to be doing now that will make a difference in how that 30 years happen?
Mayo Queen, thank you for your time on TVC Breakfast.
You're welcome.